The circular sock knitting machine. Where are we at? It has been such a long time. You probably have a lot of questions of, is it even something that I'm still using? Because it's been over a month since we've had a chat about this. And yes, I have successfully made socks. I do enjoy the machine. Asked me that a few weeks ago and it probably would have been a different answer. I'm getting to the point now where I know the ins and outs of my machine and I'm enjoying it. I'm having a fun time. There are going to be a lot of things that I talk about, a lot of my frustrations in this video, and I don't want you to take this as a negative video in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's very important that I full disclosure of my entire journey from the last time, which was unboxing. It was all set up. I did a little bit of a swatch, didn't do anything of the end, essentially just a tube. I just spun the yarn around a couple of times. That was it. Then I was ready to go and make a sock. Now, the process from that to me showing you a sock, a lot of things have happened. Definitely don't want you to take this as it's such a steep learning curve that if you were interested in it, don't be interested in it anymore. There's just a lot of things to learn. I have never used a circular sock knitting machine. The very first time I even saw one in person is when it arrived in the yarn dungeon and I was pulling everything out. There are so many pieces. It was important that I took some time, learned the machine first before I got going and making those socks. So that was mistake number one, was wanting to jump into it right away. And that's just me. That's never going to change. Every time I get excited about something new, I hyper focus on it. Like that is my life. That is what I want to do. I want to get it going. And now that I know how to do it, it's a lot of fun. Getting there though has been interesting. Just throwing that out there. We need to go all the way back now to the end of January when I first started working on my very first sock. There are a lot of sock attempts that I'm going to chat about. I have nothing to show for it. The issue is the very first pattern that I started with, I didn't get very far and I kept just unraveling it. Something would happen, I would unravel it, start over. And it was just this huge cycle to the point where I needed to stop and I needed to take a step back and figure out what I was going to do because obviously I was not doing the correct things. The first, I guess the official first mistake that I made was listening very heavily to other people saying what pattern to start with. Going onto the Dean and Bean site, there are so many free tutorials. There are like follow along with me, verbatim, mimic in a video format. We're gonna do it together and at the end of it, you have a sock. There's also written pattern. Everything is laid out. I mean, there is so much information for every single pattern that they have on there and it's all necessary. It's all very important. But one thing that I just got fixated on is there was a pattern that was in front, which is this one. It's on the very top of their page and it makes a lot of sense because I highly suggest that you start with this one. But right underneath it, there's another one that says, if you avoid the Kitchener stitch. I crochet way more than I knit, but I have knit my own socks and other things as well. So I have done the Kitchener stitch, but it has been a very long time. And I don't know why, but I just got that in my head that like, oh, I don't want to do the Kitchener stitch. So I'm going to start with this pattern instead of the very first one. I should not have done that because that pattern just did not work for me. And it is nothing to do with the pattern. I think knowing everything I know now, I could go back to it. I'm just not ready to yet because I attempted it so many times and have nothing to show for it that we're going to give it, I don't know, maybe another month. I'll try it. I'll probably try it sooner than that. The point is, I just did it a lot of times and it wasn't working for me. Since it was a toe up instead of this one, which was cuff down, I would get to a part very quickly where I needed to hang the stitches And tension is so important at that part. Keep in mind, this is the very first week that I had this machine, so I didn't really know it very well. And tension, I had no idea where it wanted to sit. There are a couple of gauges on there that I was playing around with, but it was like every single time. So I'd start this pattern off, get to the part where I'd have to hang it, and it was just incredibly tight. And they even say there on the pattern that if it's this tight, you gotta start over. Sorry about it. You did all that work, but your tension is not right and it's not gonna work for this. Obviously, I wouldn't want it because it would just have been so tight on my foot that I would never have worn it. But I was getting to a point where I was like, okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the tension is off. It's really, really tight, but I just wanna make a sock. I wanna have one thing that I can show for all of these days that I've worked on this machine. So I hung it. It was incredibly tight, like I could like bounce off of it. That's how tight it was. Cranked over one more time, and every single stitch hopped right off of the needle. Exactly what they said was going to happen happened. Shocking, right? That was the end of that day, which I think was day number 7 or 8 or something. Shut everything down, picked up a crochet blanket, and just had a nice little palette cleanser because I needed to figure out a different direction and accept that that pattern is not working for me, so I'm gonna go back to the other one. At this point, I didn't really mind doing a Kitchener stitch. I was like, even if I hate it, it's just one tiny row of Kitchener stitch. Couldn't be that bad. Now, I actually enjoy the Kitchener stitch. It's probably because of the fact that I had such a hard time with this first pattern that I really appreciate it and will take the time, just throw on a little movie, work up one row of Kitchener stitch and be done, and I have a completed sock. The second pattern that I worked on, which is actually the first one that they suggest on there, I can successfully finish an entire pair of socks, like 2 full socks, in less than 2 hours. That is wild to me, and that is why I really love my machine. I mean, crochet or knit, it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's gonna take way more time, like days, sometimes weeks, because it's not like I'm sitting down and crocheting a sock 24/7 or like 8 hours throughout a day. You know, I normally like pick it up, set it down. This one though, less than 2 hours, I can get up in the morning, have my coffee, crank out a brand new pair of socks for the day, and continue getting ready. Like, this is just wild to me, and this is exactly the reason that I got this machine. I love handmade socks. I love using hand-dyed yarn for it. It's such a fun way to showcase the fingering weight yarn that I get from a lot of yarn artists, and being able to work it up rather quickly, I can showcase more of them. So I was really excited for this pattern. Once I got going, I cranked out 30 rows like it said, then hung the row, which creates this little bit right here. It's like just a nice little chunky cuff. And you can see since I folded it over or like hung the stitches, I don't have to close this. Like, it closed on its own. There's just one tiny spot, like the beginning of the yarn, I need to tie it off and then hide it, but I can do that inside here since this is essentially a tube now. Moved on to the leg, which for this one, I think I did 55. Later on, I ended up doing a little bit longer. Like, this is a little bit too short for me. It's actually too small in general. I did 55 and I did 60, and now the pattern, I'm up to 70 for the toe, and then for here, I do 65. Trial and error, that's just what it's been, but I still love these, and I do wear them, even though they're just a tiny bit too small. Made it through the leg, and then got to the heel. That is where I had mistake number 2, or not mistake, I guess, just like frustration number 2, was figuring out how to make the heel. From the tutorial, they tell you to pick up half of the needles. Once that is spun over, the needles that are pushed down are still being worked, and the needles that are up, they're out of commission. They're not working. They won't form the little knot for the yarn. You can spin over that, and then you can also spin backwards, which is really important because when all the needles are down, it doesn't go both ways. Very important because I don't want it to go both ways or like accidentally bump it and then it spins the opposite direction. My stitches would fall off. Like, I don't want that. But I couldn't get it to spin both ways. I would pick up the needles, but once I got to the edge, it would just like it kept getting, I don't know, it was just stuck. So I asked other people that had the machine, like, what am I doing wrong? I would show them what was happening. They're like, I don't know, like you lifted the needles up, it should be spinning. So then I got it into my head that, okay, maybe there's something wrong with the machine, or like I put it together incorrectly, which led to me completely disassembling the entire machine. This was actually a very important step because I am such a why person. I prefer to know why everything is happening the way it's happening. So even though it's nice to have the video tutorial of following along and everything, I wanted to know why. Like, why am I lifting the needles? Why am I wrapping the yarn behind a needle? Why is it two instead of one? Like, I constantly was asking why. So in a sense, it was kind of a good thing that I got stopped at this part because it really made me get into my machine and learn every single part. Like, obviously the parts that are in the circular socketing machine, they're there for a reason. So like, what is that reason? I feel very confident now that I know basically everything that's going on with it because I did a huge deep dive into the machine in general, not even like making patterns, but just the machine and how it functions and like 3D printing it. I have no intention or desire at this moment in time to print my own or make my own, but like that is that I was getting into of every single part is here for this reason. Spent an entire week learning about this machine, more than I'll probably ever really need to know, and realized that it was something incredibly simple, which I knew that was going to happen because that's how it always goes. I wasn't cranking it far enough over, so the last needle was not completely moving over, which meant that it was getting stuck. This little half moon plastic bit is used to pick up half of the needles, so they are no longer being used. The black mark is my main mark and the slime green mark over here is the half mark. That's how I know to pull up which needles. So I was just pulling these up and I need to crank completely over. That all of these have to be able to make it over top of this plastic part, which these ones you can already see it too low. It's gonna, yeah, it's gonna stop it. So they all have to be at a certain angle without pulling it too far that the needles pop off. When it gets to this part, I can't go both ways because these ones are being used. These are the only ones that I can go back and forth. And right there, see, it even like stalled a little bit. That's because I didn't have it pulled over far enough. So the needles down here kept getting stuck and jammed underneath that plastic bed. Knowing what I know now, that's incredibly simple. I probably saved myself a lot of future frustrations now that I know the machines in and outs. When something happens, which inevitably it will, I'll be able to problem solve a lot better and hopefully it'll just be a lot smoother for me. Once I got to the part where the sock was finished, pulled everything off and had to do the Kitchener stitch, it was not that bad. Yes, it does take a long time to do, but it's only one row. I did end up messing this up because I was just so excited that I had a completed sock. I did the Kitchener stitch on the outside. I do still wear these. This is a part that you're not even gonna see because it goes in my actual shoe. So I've wore these quite a bit already, and I did the other one the same, just that way it feels the same. I didn't want one of it to be on the inside, one on the outside, so I just rolled with the mistake, but it is finished. I'm not pulling these apart. This is finished. For my mental state, I needed this pair of socks. Like, I needed to say I had finished a pair of socks on my knitting machine. I know how to use it. Here we go. This is it. It was late at night and I wanted to wear them tomorrow, so we rolled with it. However it looked was how it was gonna look. And you can definitely see there are some, apart from the Kitchener mistake, on this one there is a few, yeah, like I dropped a couple of stitches right there, didn't pick them up fully, but I tried. Like, this was, again, my first completed one. I tried to do the best possible, knowing what I know now after I've made quite a few. I think I have about 6 socks like finished that I've done. That would be an easy thing to fix. I could even go back and do the Kitchener stitch on the inside of it, but I'm not going to. Like I said, I just needed this pair to be done. And this is like here's my very first one that I made. We're moving on from here. Again, it's just a confidence thing. It's going from those first few weeks where I had nothing to show from it, but just all this time that I put into it, all this energy that was going towards it, and just nothing. So people would ask about like, oh, how's the sock knitting machine going? And I just was just a tiny bit discouraged because I didn't have anything that I could show from it. It's a journey. So there's nothing wrong with having those days of just learning the machine and not actually working on a pattern. Or when I was working on a pattern, I was just, doing swatches of it. I would get to the heel and just do that part over and over and over until I knew exactly how to do it, the entire ins and outs of it. So there was, for the first part of the day when I sat down to do this sock, I think I remade the heel 10 different times. So I would make the heel something, maybe I would drop a stitch or maybe there would be a little hole in it. Then I would cake everything back up and start again. Like I was determined to figure this out. And I'm very glad that I did that because now it's a lot easier. This is what it looks like after making 3 pairs of socks. You can see that there is a little bit of fiber in here. I add this dry lube after every single pair of socks. At 3 socks, we'll pull this apart and do a deep clean. That might be a little excessive. Right now, I just want to maintain it and keep it going and functioning as smoothly as possible. Maybe in the future, I'll find that I can wait until 4 or 5 pairs of socks, but right now everything is just fine and it's good practice for me too. For my setup, I took over this 3-tier cart and everything that came in with the box is here. All of the extra bits, things that I'm not using right now, as well as the worksheets that come with every single pattern. I have been printing them out and doing all the math with it to figure out the size, what I need, how many rows, things like that. I think it'll be really nice for when I make socks to gift and I don't have that person right there to measure and everything. They can just tell me their size and I can get it as close as possible. I have all of my extra cones. These all I need to take them off, but I'm so glad that I got as many cones as I did. It is really, really nice to have options. I have 2 that are empty out of all of these that I have. And there's 3 up there. So I have 10 of these in total and only 2 left over. I have 1 caked up with just the waste yarn that I use to get started on it. And so this one just always has it on here because I can re-cake this up and use it for as many sock patterns as I want to. These colors, however, it's very important that I have options and variety. When I was starting to do the pattern, like after I had figured out the heel and I was like, yes, this pattern is for me, then it became I need to work with different colorways because I'm gonna get bored of just this one single colorway, which was this. This is the one I started with. I haven't made a full sock with it yet because I ripped this out and started over so many times that I just kind of got sick of the color, which is unfortunate because this is it's a trick or treat hand-dyed yarn. I am making a sock. I have one right here. I need to just finish the Kitchener stitch and then it's totally done. Variety was really important and also to keep me excited about the project when things would go wrong or I would need to start over again. I would just grab a different color to go with that. This is what I have left of the very first sock that I finished through and through. Another thing with the pattern, I needed to write it down in a way that made sense to me. Even though there's a tutorial and there's also a written pattern, there's just so much information in the actual pattern. I needed to kind of condense it in a way that makes sense and I can go A, B, C, quick, because, I don't need all the extra bits in it now that I've done it over and over and over. So that's what this little book is full of, all my notes and everything for me to understand each and every single part that's coming up in the pattern and just kind of condense it a little bit. I'm going to continue doing that with all of the patterns that I have. And since I'm at a point where I feel very confident about this one, and like I said, I've made it many, many times, I'm ready to move on to the next part, or the next experimentation, which is the ribbon. This is going to be used to create some designs on the actual leg parts of the socks. There is, I think, a few tutorials on there. Basically just make some cool designs. It's going to be another process. Like, this is definitely going to be another day for me of just sitting down and figuring it out. Every single one of these is like, all these parts are not used at once. This is for all of the sizes. Since I got the whole kitchen sink, there's a different one that goes with every single one of these. So it looks more difficult than it's going to be. I'm sticking with that for now anyways. We'll see once I get going how easy it is. I feel fairly confident, and then after that, I'm gonna move on to color work. I think it'd be really fun to have my own patterns for color work and create some fun designs with it that way. So that is where I'm at on my sock knitting machine journey. I feel like I'm a little more confident going into this next part because I don't have to learn from ground zero this entire machine and all the stuff. I'm just adding things onto it. So the next video that comes out, that's going to be about the ribber, the leg part of the sock, and also leg warmers. There are two patterns right next to it, and one of them is a leg warmer. Leave me a pumpkin emoji if you're all about those leg warmers, because I don't know, I can't get enough of them. I love adding them to any outfit that I have. Fairly confident the next video is going to come out a lot sooner. We're just going to keep rolling from there, and before I know it, I'm going to be doing Halloween color work all over my socks. All right, so that is it, ghouls. Thank you again for hanging out with me, chit-chatting all about this circular sock knitting machine. Have a fantastically spooky rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video.